Hello and welcome ladies and gentlemen, my name is Crash and I've always been thinking about doing a One Piece videos since day one, but the problem was always that I've been watching One Piece YouTubers for a while now, and I know that pretty much any analysis or review that I might do will just be kind of a repeat of what other people may have done. I never felt like there was something that I could add to the One Piece community, except my experience with the series. But 4 months ago I made a video called A Love Letter to Doro, and that was supposed to be the first in a series of videos where I talk about my favorite manga and my experiences with them. And if the first video was about my favorite manga, it makes sense then that my second video is about my most important manga, One Piece. The One Piece manga came out in 1997, the anime in 1999, and I first heard about it a couple years later, around 2006 to 2007. The first time I heard about One Piece was on a TV ad, and it was also the first time I heard another word that would eventually be important to me, but I didn't realize it, nor did I know what the word actually meant: anime. The ad said that One Piece was the best anime since Dragon Ball, and I don't know why I still remember the ad from 15 years ago. 15 years. Well, I think I remember it because it said it was better than Dragon Ball, which was the biggest show in my country. Everyone loved Dragon Ball, and I did too. Nothing could be better than Dragon Ball, surely. And of course that anime word was kind of foreign, but I kinda assumed it was some sort of cartoon show. When I got to high school, that word came up again. Naruto was exploding and everyone was watching it. All the other guys from my class were getting into anime. One Piece, Bleach, Fullmetal Alchemist, the original, because this was 2007. And so while Naruto was very popular among my friends and I eventually prioritized it, I started with the anime that was supposedly better than Dragon Ball. And it was decent. It starts with a strong and iconic opening, and don't get me wrong, I think East Blue is great. I think pretty much every arc has something going for it. Even Syrup Village, which is normally considered the worst One Piece arc. I really like Kuro and the way he fixes his glasses, and I used to do it a lot, and by used to I mean I still kinda do it sometimes. Just that when I compared those 4 first arcs or so versus Naruto's early arcs, I mean, there was a reason why I prioritized Naruto. And Bleach, I know Substitute Shinigami isn't people's favorite arc, but it made Bleach my favorite anime in those early days. And comparing the first chapter of Fullmetal Alchemist to these is just unfair because of this. The second half of East Blue, however, raises things up. Baratie was the first really good backstory that Hawada had, but afterwards we get our main event of the saga, Harlem Park. And to me, this is where One Piece started to claim the ranks. It felt epic, it felt like what all the previous arcs had been building up to. I was invested in Nami's story, the villain was just so cool, cooler than Kuro even, and most of the fights were pretty awesome. But the next arc, Harabasta, that made One Piece my number 1. The first key moment was Chopper's backstory, which destroyed me at the time, and it's still my favorite backstory of the Strawhats. I know it's not a common opinion when we have Robin and Brook, but Chopper really made me tear up. But the one moment I always remember as the moment that put One Piece above all the others was the first fight between Luffy and Crocodile. And Crocodile just beating the hell out of Luffy. I was not expecting it. Luffy had pretty much destroyed every villain till here. Sure, he had some problems with Arlong, but it wasn't even comparable with how Crocodile Man handled him. It raised the stakes a lot, and it made me incredibly eager for their next fight, which was awesome. At that point, I was just immersed into the story and characters, and every arc from there on out just kept getting more magical and fantastic and exploring the world more and more. It really does make you feel like you're one of the Straw Hats, and I think that was always one of its strongest points, that you could get attached to these characters and see them fight for their goals. As I got more and more into manga, it made reading One Piece a bit slower. It took me about a year to fully catch up with the 500 chapters that was on at the time, and I mention this because there's a lot of people who don't want to get into One Piece because of how big it is. And I get it, we're past 1,000 chapters. It's kinda a lot, but you don't need to binge it. You can take it as slow as you want, enjoy and savor the adventure. Whether it takes you a month or a year or 5 to catch up. Just enjoy it at your own pace, there's no rush. And I caught up just in time to see 2 of the biggest deaths in real time. Seriously, imagine what it's like to have your first weekly experience in One Piece be the middle of Marineford. Everything was happening, it felt, and in a way it was, like the culmination of everything that One Piece had been building up to from the start. Those arcs from Sabaody onwards, they are still my favorite part in One Piece. And then we had the time skip, a full month break. I know nowadays we have breaks and they are pretty regular, but even then we don't get a full month of breaks, and even less at the time. I remember at the time being in a One Piece forum and just speculating the designs of the characters with other people and what was gonna happen, and I was just so excited. Seriously, I can't think of anything else in manga so far that has made me as excited as that month of just waiting to see what's gonna happen. How would One Piece be after this time skip? And that One Piece forum, man, it wasn't just a forum, it was one of the most important, if not the most important community I was part of. It felt like how I want communities and fandoms to be nowadays. No way, just fun and a share of a common love for this world and these characters. Everyone was so much fun, and I was even lucky enough to eventually become a staff of the forum, the Pirona mod. Because I really like Pirona's design, I still do. I have 2 figures of her and I'd buy more. I'm trying not to spend money on figures anymore. Every mod had a character to represent them, and I was known for liking Pirona, and I owned it. I still do. Pirona is the best One Piece character, don't even hat me. Eventually, forums died, especially during the transition into modern social media platforms, like Facebook. And so the forums died in 2013, and I kept talking with some of the members for a little while, but eventually I got away from them, and I'm pretty happy I got to reconnect with some of them recently. And if by any chance anyone from the good old days of One Piece Portugal forums is watching, which I hope 1 or 2 of you are, I just want to say that it was important. And, you know, those moments, the people, the community, they were, even if sometimes I may not let it know, they were important. And it was around the time that forums died that I kind of started removing myself from the anime and manga community. I've gathered enough friends from those forums and from school and college and conventions that I just didn't felt too much of a need to find internet communities. So last thing I remember being popular was Sword Art Online, and then to me the next big thing I heard about was Demon Slayer. Now, I don't know what the community was watching or reading between these two. I knew what my friends were watching and reading, and I used their opinions and whatever looked interesting on my anime list as a basis for what to read. And then I came back to communities in 2009, and that will eventually lead to this channel, and that has nothing to do with One Piece. So to let us get back on track, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because not only did it start dropping away from the community, eventually I just started dropping away from manga. And have in mind that I stopped following titles like Bleach, Berserk, Villain Saga, and I'm a Hero, which all of them were ongoings that I liked, and honestly 2 of them were at their peak. It's easy to assume that I would stop following One Piece as well. Especially because, let's be honest, Fishman Island and especially Punkazard are far from being the hype arcs that I expected them to be to start this new era. And you know, in retrospect, Fishman Island is a very needed arc. And if you don't count disappointment of final fights, which I get the point, but I don't like the point, the arc itself is good. It got us back on track with a lot of the world building, which I haven't mentioned because everyone else has, but the world building is just perfect. Am I allowed to say that? What was that? This is my video and I'm allowed to say whatever I want? Okay, it's perfect. I mean, I understand One Piece isn't as super planned as people sometimes think it is, but the ability to go back to these characters and places and just evolve them constantly to where it feels like actual time is passing and actual things are happening all over the world. There's always a feeling that, like Alabasta for example, a place that the Strawhats haven't visited since chapter 200 or something, it feels like there's things happening, that the characters went on with their lives, because they come up later and they have knowledge of other things that have changed. Not every change happens on screen, and some people may not like that, but it makes it feel more real and more alive this way. But going back, Fishman Island has a lot of things that are important for the overall lore, and it's kind of a build-up arc. But then we go to Punkazard, and it's just another arc just there to build up Dressrosa. And again, Punkazard is an arc where a lot of the things that are currently relevant started. But Dressrosa was the first arc where, to me, it really felt like it was what I wanted from the post-time skip. It's bigger, it's more epic, there's a seriously big villain that I've been building up for more than a decade. It might have been too big, but all in all, I really liked it. And we've kind of lost the point that I was trying to make, but the thing is, I just couldn't read manga. I couldn't finish it, I couldn't keep up with it. I had a massive burnout, and I'm planning on doing a full separate video where I'm actually going to go a bit more into why that happened, but I just dropped everything. I moved to other hobbies, eventually got a job, a girlfriend, and I started feeling a bit more distant from manga, from that thing that I used to be so passionate about. And I dropped so much that I haven't been able to go back to most of it. I still need to catch up with Villain Saga, which I haven't read a chapter since 2014, and I still somehow consider it one of my top 15 manga. There was some series that I kept up till the end, Assassination Classroom, Nisekoi, Beelzebub, but when they all ended, which all of them did, I just stopped. But not One Piece. One Piece has always been there for me, from the day that I started till now. Almost half of my life and more than half of One Piece's run. It's always been there. And it's kind of comforting to know that you can count on Luffy and Zoro and the rest to be there week after week after week after week. Then break, and then week after week, and then break. But Oda deserves the breaks that he's getting. Every mangaka does. But he's been doing this for so long. He needs the rest. But these last two arcs, I love them. I really, really do. But they are reminders. We are approaching its end. It's not going to be now, but it's ending. One Piece is not eternal, at least not in a weekly sense. Luffy is going to find a One Piece. Everyone's going to make their dreams come true. And the story will end inevitably, and it's not that far off. A couple of years, yes, but not that far off. And I'm going to have to deal with that. And I don't know how yet. Because One Piece is my consistency. It's what has always been there. In the best of times, and in the worst of times. Thankfully, I'm already starting to collect the volumes and revisiting old arcs. I'm now at the beginning of Skypiea, and I've been there for a while because this channel has removed a lot of time that I had for reading manga. But it's been amazing going back because it's my first reread, and my memory of the things from 10 years ago is not as good as I'd like it to be. And early One Piece has such a fun feeling to it. It's magical, honestly. And I'm going to have it all, eventually. I need to. Because when it ends, I need to have it there with me. My consistency. And I'll leave it at that. If you want to see me babble about another manga that I love and hear about how I eventually return to manga again after the burnout, check out my love letter to Dorero on the left. And if you watch this little here, thank you very much. And I'll see you next video.